6:01 p.m. First, let's do an agenda review. Do we have any reasons to move any of the items on the agenda as far as people know? Hearing none, we're going to proceed with the agenda as it is. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Get my view back.
Nilda, Nilda, this is Bill. I just want to let you know that Leah Fitzgerald, one of our students reps, is on the Zoom as well, just so you know.
She's doing what?
One of our student representatives that we talked to at the last meeting, Leah Fitzgerald, is online with us, is on the Zoom call. Just so you had that note for yourself. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Phil Gore's on the line too, and he introduced himself to me before we started.
Yeah, and we can do that.
Okay. So we're at the visitor section of our agenda. Are there any persons that are online or in the room that would like to address the board as visitors?
We don't have any visitors here at the meeting.
Okay. Hearing none. I think. I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda. One of them is several sets of minutes and the other one is the media packet. Anyone need to have anything removed from the consent agenda to be discussed independently? Hearing none, we'll accept the consent agenda as it is. Next item on the agenda is item 6, reports to the board. We have a report from Casey Provost. He's going to do a report on professional development, and we have that presentation as attachment 6A. I'm going to turn it over to Casey.
Is it best if I go up here?
Yeah, probably, maybe, or use that mic at least. So we can capture it for everybody.
Can you hear me on the screen? Or in Zoom land? Okay. I'm gonna sit. That's all right. All right, so if you have had a chance to look at this already, wonderful. If not, thank you for coming to the Professional Development Show. So I'm presenting some of the professional development that we have done as a district. We're looking through a few different lenses. One is what we do as a district, some things that are done specifically within buildings or programs, and then a bulk of what we think about when in terms of professional development is what teachers or paraeducators or staff within the district elected to take on for their own professional growth and development. So this covers some of the major topics, but in reality, professional development happens every single day in every one of our buildings. So in every staff meeting that happens, at every coaching session that happens, there's professional development that's truly ongoing every single day. So this just does some surface level things and some looking up from a higher perspective as well. So we'll go ahead to the next slide, please, John. So the first slide is some things that are done throughout the district. So there are a few examples here. The first one that you can't maybe see here is the International Institute of Restorative Practices. So we have a committee, a social emotional learning committee that is composed of representatives from across the district, so all of our schools. This winter, they participated in a training with IIRP, and the plan is that this coming year, 2022-23, those folks who were trained as facilitators and trainers will be able to train all of our staff in restorative practices, so that there's a lot of knowledge about restorative practices, and it's already happening within our schools, but we want to make sure that instead of just referring to restorative practices or restorative conversations, that staff really have the skills to be able to support students in both developing community strengthening relationships, and when challenges occur or when it occurs or damage is done, that we can work through that. That's one more tool that will be really helpful in our tool belt. So there's a plan that's being developed right now for what that'll look like next year, but we're expecting that it may begin in August in service. There's more to come with that. The next is trauma-informed student support. So our district, as I'm sure you know, has worked with Dr. Joelle Van Lent, and that's not a new level of support for us, but it takes different shapes. So Dr. Van Lent has presented, schools have had multiple sessions with Joelle, and she's done sort of overarching topics to support how we work with children, also to work on supporting staff with self-care. She's done some work there too. Joelle also works with with schools and individual consultation, and that work will continue into next year as well. So we're really fortunate to have Joelle working closely with all of our schools, and it's going to look a little bit different next year, but we're excited that we'll continue to have that relationship with her. The last one that's listed there, Handle with Care and Rule 4500. So in each of our schools, we have staff who are trained who can support students when they're in crisis and need support with de-escalation, ensuring that those interventions are done only when absolutely necessary, and to ensure student safety that is in compliance with Rule 4500 that has to do with seclusion and restraint of students. So those are just some of the things that happen across the system. As we get into other things, you'll see things like first aid and CPR. Those are quite common for staff as well. So here are just some examples about professional development that happens within buildings or within programs. We intentionally shared out on behalf of all of our schools as opposed to saying this is exactly what city school is doing, this is what town school is doing, and all of our schools. We recognize, and I'm not going to read that list for you, and I have a much longer list, but in addition to that, there's great work that's done around literacy and math and specific areas that are needed. So as principals, directors, teacher leaders are identifying areas that staff could use additional support in, we bring professional development to our schools. You'll see some of them, like Devereaux Early Childhood Assessment. There are some specific requirements for early childhood. That's not necessarily a requirement, but there are some that are specific to programs. So, like I said, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but professional development is ongoing, and principals and directors are both forecasting ahead to predict how to support staff, but also being responsive to bring in the professional development that staff need on an ongoing basis as well. So this slide does the best to capture the individual, or sometimes on a group basis, professional development that happens. So when our staff think about professional development, they may think about a course that they're going to be taking or a workshop that they'll be participating in. This is much of the professional development that captures all of the professional development on an individual or small group basis. So if staff are interested, or if they are encouraged to take a particular class or workshop, then we have a system within the district that they have an allotment of funds to support their professional development and growth. That's often tied to both their own goals that they've set with their supervisors, and are also directly attached to the work that they do. So it's connected to their teaching assignment, it's connected to a goal of the district. So staff who are seeking out additional opportunities for professional development are ensuring that what they're doing will impact their own performance, and hopefully they'll have a chance then at the building level to share that out with others, either on their teams or at a staff meeting. So just as an example, you'll see that I won't go through every line of this, but there were in mathematics, that's our highest number, so there were 51 participants in a course. And not all of the 51 will refer to specifically to the Vermont Math Initiative or Institute, John. initiative, I think. So VMI is a common acronym that our teachers will mention. These are all different. So some of these things, if it says a workshop or conference, it may well be a 1 or a 2-day session. If it was a course, it was likely a 3-credit graduate course. There is some variance there depending on what folks are looking for. But we just wanted to show you that professional development is a huge benefit to our staff, that they can participate in learning either at the graduate level or work through a conference or workshop. And a lot of our staff do participate in this, and we like to promote it as one of the greatest benefits of working in our district. While a lot of districts do offer similar benefits, we like to promote this as something that our staff really appreciate, and it helps their professional growth and ultimately impacts student performance. This slide is just a reminder about what that benefit that I was just speaking about refers to. So these are amounts in our current master agreement. So professional staff who are licensed educators, if folks hold a bachelor's degree, they are eligible for $4,068 plus an additional $500. So we're encouraging that folks who hold a bachelor's degree will obtain a master's degree. So there's additional benefit for folks who join the district or who have been in the district to take additional graduate courses to work toward their next degree. Teachers or professional staff with a master's degree or beyond are eligible for $2,034 plus an additional $500. And if folks have met their professional development allotment, then an administrator can suggest or can offer additional funds. So if someone has already taken 2 classes, but something else comes up that could be a really great fit for them, we want to be responsive to that as well. Educational support staff, you authorize $75,000 towards professional development for ESPs, and ESPs on an individual basis can access up to $1,500 of professional development funds as well. We thought this may be something that you would like to know, so we budget for, as a district, we budget for these amounts versus how much we are actually are taking on for professional development. So this year, we have currently spent $210,000 out of the $393,000 that's been budgeted. That number is probably at least a couple weeks old now because we were prepared for the last meeting, and professional development is very busy. John knows this better than I do, but staff are probably almost daily, definitely weekly, multiple times weekly, are requesting additional opportunities to engage in professional development. So that number is even higher. A few slides back, the number of activities have only increased from now. Staff are always looking for opportunities there. And at this point, I think I will mostly turn over to John, who's going to speak about where we are headed as a district.
Yeah, so thank you, Casey. That was that's a great orientation to the way professional learning's been functioning for us and the kind of patterns that have established. With what's on the slide right now, this is a partial listing of the offerings for our first ever Summer Institute, which we've secured federal grant money for through our Consolidated Federal Grant Program to fund on an ongoing basis for teachers. So this year in the fall, you may have remembered from a previous board meeting, Bill presented some of the feedback we got from students and from staff in the I think it was an October survey that we administered. One of the biggest pieces from the staff and faculty was that in the era of COVID-19 and really out of a desire to be here for our kids day to day, they were struggling to engage in quality professional learning the way that they had previously been able to, and that some of the online offerings were really failing to meet some of their expectations. This is happening at the same time that schools are being encouraged or required really to develop better systems of professional learning to meet the needs of students. And so we've engaged in a pilot program really to develop a summer institute right after school ends that's optional for faculty to participate in, where all of the learning is linked to existing school goals or requirements that have been placed upon us as a district. And so you can see we have things from effective math classroom structures to intervention programs based on the Wilson Reading Program to project-based learning or blended learning for secondary classroom and on. We administered a survey actually a little bit earlier this year, and the interest level from the faculty was extremely strong, much stronger than we anticipated. I wasn't sure how many people felt like they would have the capacity to extend their year and engage in learning like this, but here we are. So this is really the beginning of a change in the way that we plan and organize professional learning at the district to try to make it easier for teachers to participate in and more tightly aligned with the goals that we have as a district.
Hey, John. Are these going to be workshops or are these going to be, excuse me, 4-credit classes?
So they're all a little different. They range anywhere from a half a day workshop to one of them, the comprehensive reading instruction course is actually 9 days, and the teachers are eligible to take that as a workshop model or to take it for graduate credit if they want.
Okay. What about the Wilson?
So Wilson doesn't have a graduate offering. This is the introductory certificate offering for them.
So it's the first part.
Yep, and then there's a pathway for people who want to continue and get the full certificate and even graduate credit if they want, for them to continue that at the conclusion of the summer institute.
Would you entertain possibly people from other school districts?
So I've been in touch with all the curriculum directors in the area, and different schools are doing different things, but we've all been sharing our plans. And on a space available basis, we're totally happy to collaborate.
Okay.
I think that we'll grow that capacity over time. This year, because it's a pilot, we have high impact opportunities, but I didn't go crazy with the number of seat spaces and instructors that we booked. But if this is as successful as it's looking like it will be, I'm certainly hopeful we can expand it in the future.
Yeah, that Wilson,
It's a great program.
yeah, you'll have that impact. That's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
When a professional in the district wants to take a graduate level course, before it can be approved, does it have to be in their current level of assignment?
So like towards licensure or towards
Right.
their current contract?
Right.
No, it doesn't exactly have to be, but it has to be related to something to do with their improvement of their capacity in their job.
Okay,
But it wouldn't have to be, so say you're a math teacher, it wouldn't have to be in math.
right, understand, thank you.
So it looks like there's obviously more budgeted than's being spent in terms of the budget. What are some of the reasons that would stand in the way of us using that full amount, like every single, what are some of the things that would maybe get in the way of a teacher or a staff member engaging in this kind of program?
So for the past 2 years especially, there's been lots of obstacles, including last minute cancellations and pieces like that. Prior to that, and Bill or Martha could speak to this as well, I think the accounting practice maybe would be the way to describe it, is to budget for a little more than we anticipate we might need and err on the side of safety versus end up having obligations we couldn't meet.
But there's never like a time when a teacher or a staff member or something wants to do something and they're like given a no.
So
Not like a
Sorry, I can speak to that. I'll speak to it from a budget standpoint, Brian, and then John runs professional, which I did years past.
Excuse me, can we exit the presentation so I can see the crowd better?
So we budget proportionally to what basically the 3-year rolling average, and that's what Martha does in her work. And unfortunately, if she's here, if she's back next time, we can give you some more details on that. So we've been watching the average and budgeting for it. That's not our total liability, but under the master agreement, we're up for the total liability because we are required by the master agreement to offer what you saw Casey put up there before, 6 or 3 credits, depending on the degree level of the teacher. Saying all that, my philosophy is the best way to improve student learning is through the effectiveness of the staff, and actually professional research has shown that. The number one factor for student learning is the professional practice of the educator in front of them. So I believe that happens, and one of the things that John can talk to you more about, and wasn't really part of this presentation, but all the work he's been doing with the coaches in the district, that job embedded professional development, we're finding it's actually while it seems like a high cost, it's one of the most effective in moving student achievement for the professional.
Yeah, so I'm happy to speak it more well to that. If
I
that's
just
okay.
was giving the budget.
But the short answer is people don't get professional development denied because of budgetary reasons.
Sure. And it's as much as possible, you guys try to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we want to.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Casey or John? Again, thank you both for that presentation. Next item on the agenda is old business. Before I get there, Bill, other than Leah, are there any other students here?
No, I don't think so. No, and we thought maybe Leah's here, she'd be glad to, she's put a piece in the chat saying she'd be willing to comment on the work they've done as student advisory folks, if you want to do that, Nelda.
Why don't we do that right now before we get into the old business, if she'd be willing to give us an update on what they've been doing in regards to that. Leah, are you there?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm real sorry I'm not in person right now. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You may have to
I
turn.
think it
You're echoing. so
might be lagging. I'm actually,
You're echoing. So do you have more than one device on?
John's working on it. You want to chat her?
I'm actually just sitting at the Catherine Street. I didn't know it was at that.
What it was on.
I need to have. Anyways, I'm going over what we went. Yes. Can you hear me better?
That's a little bit better, Leah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Advisory committee is we're trying to find a policy that will fit the vision that the group has for the board to have a student rep. We're really want to make sure that it fits the idea of rotating students and maybe have a small group of kids. I know that it was expressed last meeting that we want kids that are really involved, and we don't want this to die out in a couple of years. So we're trying to make sure that we get that rotation of students involving students through the years, and not just having them go for 1 year and kind of leave without any guidance for the younger, for the underclassmen. So when we're looking at policy, we're trying to make sure that the term limits fit that the idea that they will serve for 2 terms and kind of be coaching the groups that come before. So what we're looking at is having each student serve for 2 terms, not 2 terms, 2 years, and having new students come in and kind of get to watch and learn, like the juniors and seniors, on how they do that. So we are just working that out and making it look pretty for everybody, and then we will most likely have that ready next meeting for everybody to see. And so that's just the policy I'm going to look like, and we can go more into the procedure at a later time. But we're just focusing on how we're going to start for the next year, so we can really get the start.
Thank you, Leah. Anyone have any questions for Leah?
And I think that's where we're at.
Okay, thanks again. Okay, next item on the agenda is now old business. We have the COVID update. Bill, can you give us a COVID update, please?
Yeah, thank you, Nilda. I'm going to do that. First want to thank the board for last week. Sorry I couldn't be here, but as you know, we have both COVID, but we also have a flu type cold that's going around that I happen to get. I know there's others that have it, and so we're seeing the effects of both in our buildings. We've had some pretty tight attendance of staff, not so much students, but that we've been keeping some buildings open on a shoestring right now. But as I checked in with one building that had high attendance issues with staff today, probably a third of their staff out was due to COVID, 2/3 for other reasons. So, and that guy, we were pretty close to 20 people out. So, and we haven't been tracking the internal numbers for students because we just don't have the ability with knowing when kids are out, that we're really getting the information that kids, do they have COVID or not. And we're seeing that, I mean, that's been out there in the media too, and for the state numbers. So I would say that more and more we're learning how to live with COVID. That's what we're doing. Short, I'm glad to take any questions, but that's what I have. And Nilda, I'd ask, it doesn't have to be discussed tonight, but if this wants to be a continual topic, or let it go through the end of the school year and we talk about it next year, or how we want to address that as the board, or how you would like to address that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should continue to be a topic for a while. The numbers are creeping up again. 504 cases in Vermont yesterday. And I think that percent positivity is like 13 point something. But that's obviously of those testing. So it's that number's kind of a little skewed, but.
Those are the testing and reporting, not just the testing, you know, so
Right.
the tested.
Yeah.
So, and I
But-
think certainly one of the messages that I keep hearing, Nilda, is that, you know, we need to have this idea that right now, it isn't a mask mandate, but at some point, you know, depending on the numbers and the situation, the recommendations might change. And that we're open to that.
Are you talking about mask mandate at the schools or
Yeah.
mask mandate
Well, in general, like, you know, so right now, we don't have a mask mandate. There used to be one at the school. Okay, and we don't, and we're not testing the way we used to do in the whole 9 yards. You know, that's a kind of a fluid thing based on the numbers. Meaning, you know, next fall, if the numbers skyrocket, then the recommendations might change again.
Well, I think recommendations can always change, but I think the key number that they're looking at right now is that CDC number about low, medium, and high transmission rate, which is also factoring in the hospitalizations and the number of cases that are in the ICU. So from that perspective, this community is in a high rate right now.
No, I totally understand that. I'm just saying that moving forward, I can't assume that the current recommendations are gonna be the recommendations in the middle of the summer or in the fall or any of that, and I think it's good to have that in our mind.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the implicit bias and yes.
Joanna has a comment.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you.
I just, it's not looking for an answer right now. I don't know if it's an issue within our district or not, so I'm just asking. When you talk about, you know, the amount of staff that have had to be out, are there staff who are way beyond their sick days? Is it a huge issue in terms of people way beyond sick days, and then, and how are we managing that in terms of, I guess, pay or benefits or, however that goes, and I just wanted to know.
So in the agreement that you have with both the ESP and the professional staff,
Yeah.
you have an agreement for a sick bank in there that everyone has access to.
Okay,
We have only had one individual tap the sick bank for COVID reasons.
wow, that's fantastic. That's
And he
fantastic.
gave me the
Okay.
authority to also give unpaid days, and I've done that as well to some staff that have asked for that. And I do it pretty much with, tell me the days you were out due to COVID, and those are the days you get. I don't do much more of a test than that, it's an email, tell me the days, and we put them into their leave piece.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, thank you. Any other conversation about that? Okay, moving on to the next item. It's implicit bias and anti-racism training. We're gonna, I'd like to request a motion to award the bid to Creative Discourse Group for discussion, please.
So moved.
Okay, I think that was Grant and Al. For just,
It was Ryer now.
okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Bill to talk to us about the bids and how they came up with their recommendation.
So we reached out to 3 or 4 different groups in Vermont. As you know, we were working with Dr. Margaret Bass, and we had had some conversations with her and Lisa Bellinger about the work they've been doing with us with the SEL, and they said, we think you should have a wider conversation about this. Even though they bid on it, they said, we think there are some others that you might want to talk to about it. And so we opened up that conversation, and we were introduced to the Creative Discourse Group with Sue McCormick, who's been well known in Vermont for community conversations around democracy, and I think it's the Democracy Now! Group she used to be with, but she and Dr. Nadia Mitchell have founded the Creative Discourse Group to work, and they have about 20 to 25 associates with them. A very diverse group that can work with many other groups, and they have experience bringing communities together around marginalized communities, both racial and other identities. So their work, I'm recommending them for their work. They came to us with a little different format that we had in the fall, and actually seeing and learning about what we've gone through, really trying to reach out to different people in the community first, or groups within the community, to say, what are your hopes and dreams? And then from that, try to pull together a design committee from within the community instead of a separate design committee that we had going earlier, to then pull together a community forum somewhere in the fall. They thought that that was a better way and a less controversial way to do that. From that conversation with them, I went out and asked for bids on that piece. And I'm recommending it not only because of the where they are price point for Creative Discourse Group, but really that thought of starting small and having smaller conversations first, and bringing together a representative group of the community. So I'm recommending to you that we work with the Creative Discourse Group, and they also brought up a couple other pieces for some leadership work and consulting work, as you'll see in steps 4 and 5, with leadership team and leaders within the district.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions for Bill? You ready to take a vote?
Yes.
We have a motion to award the bid to the Creative Discourse Group. Should we put in our motion the amount and not to exceed, or are we happy leaving it at referring to the bid?
I would ask that you just refer to the bid.
Okay,
I would put the amount in.
okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Can there be a happy medium where if the financial cost is above the 85.3, that it's brought to the board and then voted on again?
We could do that, or we could just say a not to exceed amount. Or we could not talk about the amount at all.
Go with
Point
bid.
of order, they have put in a bid for that amount. We should accept that amount. If they have to come back before us with additional, at that point in time, we can evaluate whether or not we want to add that additional time.
Right, I understand that, Al. My question was, do we want to state the amount in the motion, or do we just assume that it's the amount in the bid because that's what we're voting on?
I would say for transparency purposes, it should be in the motion.
Okay, does the maker of the motion want to revise their motion?
Sake of time, yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna add the amount that's in the bid. All right, I'm gonna take a roll vote. Does this person that seconded the motion agree to the amendment? Say yes, Al.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna take a roll vote. Al? Yay or nay?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Nina?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes?
Susan?
Yes.
Grant? Joanna?
Yes.
Ryer?
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, next item on the agenda is item C. It's the policy A21, public participation at board meetings. We're going to have a discussion about that. So this policy has come up a couple of times. We tabled it last month, much to the chagrin of a few people. So we've got it back here today. You know, it's a struggle that we as a board are having, along with other boards across the state and across the country, trying to be responsive to our public and also not get into, you know, discourse with the public. We do have a gentleman here named Phil Gore, who is the Director of Board Services for the Vermont School Board Association. And I think he wants to be of support for us, somebody that Bill came in contact with in his travels as superintendent. And perhaps, Bill, you can help me out with a little more discussion here on what to talk about, Mr. Gore.
Oh, I keep hearing the word Bill and imagining I'm hearing my name. But thank you. So yeah, as you mentioned here, how to engage the public appropriately is a challenge all across the country in school board service right now. I'm a former school board member from the Seattle area. I've worked in different states and for the National School Boards Association in school board development and services for boards. This is, a revived challenge, if you will. I heard the word masks earlier, and I almost cringe or twitch knowing what that elicits in some members of the public and among some board members. There have just been a lot of challenges the last few years, especially with the pandemic, but then the overlay of political events and kind of just the economic challenges too that I think we're seeing happen kind of has the public charged. And so how does a board, move your work forward and maintain your business meetings as a meeting of the board in public, not a public meeting? And I've seen all kinds of extreme examples of people making motions from the audience. I almost said parking lot, sorry. But, you know, people making motions that are disruptive to the business of the board. How do you do both? How do you make sure that your business is being conducted in a respectful and fair manner, and also engage your public? And so those are some things that your superintendent talked with me about, providing some professional development for the board in a meeting later in May. And we just wanted to have an opportunity to see, are there some topics or particular concerns that the board has that they would like to have addressed at that time as well? How can I best be of service to you, Nilda?
Well, thank you for that question. I'd like to open it up to our board to answer. So please speak freely and talk to Mr. Gore about how you'd like to work through this.
Nilda,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
it's Susan. So my question is, it feels like we always have visitors come in and ask questions, and we never close that loop. So I'd like to figure out how we can close that loop, not necessarily at the meeting. You know, obviously there are legal and privacy issues, but how do we close that loop with the community members at a later meeting? Because I feel that's the piece that we're missing right now.
That's a very important topic. Thank you.
The one that I struggle with is when a question comes forward that I know the answer to, and it's a very simple answer.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm always cautioned as to not get into an intercourse or a dialogue with someone so that you're not actually having that conversation. So how do you deal with something that the answer is very simple and it could make, you know, somebody happy, and it's probably a 3-word response, but you hesitate to do that because you don't want to open that door, so to speak.
That's good. And that's an easy one, I think, for us to discuss. Of course, every situation can be unique. And even how to prevent at the beginning of a meeting, when you know people are there to speak about certain things, letting them know what your process is up front, in writing, at the door, on the website, letting them know how the board will handle that. And then to Susan's point, ensuring that the loop is closed, that they did get an answer, especially when it's a real simple one.
Right. So when we anticipate someone's going to come to speak to about something that's kind of a touchy subject, we do try to have sort of a I don't know the right word, prologue to the conversation to say, you know, this is what we do. This is how we talk about it. We're not going to talk about anyone disparagingly. We have certain rules that we have to follow, you know, HIPAA, FERPA, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't prevent them from saying whatever they want.
Right.
And that doesn't prevent the general public who might be listening to all that to draw conclusions that might be that the board is not doing their work. And so that's something I just want to call out.
Nilda, Grant has a question or comment.
Okay, Grant.
Thanks. Yeah, if you compare our policy to the state policy, you'll find some, you know, differences in, you know, how the board responds to questions. And, you know, my concern is that the way that the board is sort of, maybe not prohibited, but discouraged from providing that feedback. It's prohibited. Okay. That in turn could discourage the public from trying to engage with the board. And, you know, so that's kind of the situation that I think we really want to avoid, right? We want to have the public be really engaged with us, you know, and not feel like there's that obstacle there. But at the same time, you do have the issue of, you know, if you have an individual asking a group of people, you know, how to respond, we all may have different opinions. And so we haven't had the chance to sort of, you know, meld our thoughts and come up with a response from the board. So, you know, we need to know how the logistics of that work, you know, especially when it's not a simple answer, like the situations where Nilda said, hey, I know the answer, right? If it really is just a factual, quick, something you could look up, kind of answer, that's one thing, but it's the ones where it's more opinion based or more complex. You need to know how to navigate those situations.
That's good. And one of the things we'll talk about are what are some other opportunities other than a formal meeting of the board to engage with the public, to hear their concerns, to have a conversation with them. That would be something for us to talk about too.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jack would like to start on the
Okay, the situation that I've seen several times is our board chair will read a statement saying what the citizens to be heard section is all about, and what should occur and what shouldn't occur. The person who's speaking then starts to talk, and starts to talk about staff, starts to talk about students, even if it's their own kid. To me, breaks all the rules. What do we do about stopping the person? Because that person should be stopped. They shouldn't be talking about a staff member, shouldn't be talking, especially a staff member that can be identified, or a student, especially a student, even their own kid, because their own kid has rights, confidentiality rights, in my opinion. So, what do we do when the person just keeps talking and should be quieted? The other thing is, the second question I have is, should the board, after the people talk, and then when the board goes into executive session, comes up with a unified response, send something in writing by the superintendent or the board chair to the person saying the board has discussed your concern and we feel this way or that way, whatever. So, should we quiet a person who starts violating the conversation? And should we get a collective response after a discussion in executive session later on, and then email or snail mail the person a notice about the board's response?
Yeah, it's a great point and a great question. And I feel like that you just need to have this conversation, and that you already collectively have the wisdom and the answers. And so it sounds like my role would be just to kind of help guide the conversation in a meeting with you for about an hour. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. Anyone else?
Joanna's going to talk.
And then lastly, after we've identified where we want to go or how we want to proceed, how then to write that, into our policy, right? How to update our policy to be able to communicate that out to our community and, hold us accountable for following a new way.
Great point.
Anyone else have any questions? So, Phil Kimball, the plan is?
So the plan, Phil has our next meeting is on the 18th, I believe, if I'm counting correctly right here, without my calendar in front of me. Let me get it. Our next meeting is the 18th, it's 2 weeks from tonight. If we could start, so you need to have the discussion about this policy in a public meeting. You shouldn't be doing that in a training session, but you should have time for training. So what we were thinking, Phil and I talked about this, a couple weeks ago, right, Phil? Was the idea was to try to have Phil come from 5 to 6, an hour before the board meeting, have him present some things that have been going on that, he's seen in different places. As he said, he's got a lot of experience from many other states, and to bring you that information and for you to all ask him questions about it. Then to have the discussion, we'll put it first on the agenda in old business. We'll put it right up front. So then you're in your public meeting to have the discussion that you want to have about the policy. Because what we have to be careful of is you have the right as a board to do training that's not in a public session. But I want to support you as a board that this is an important piece of work that you've said for yourselves, and you want to do that in front of the public. So that you can then talk about what you'd like to have in the policy and have that discussion amongst all of you. So if people were able to do that on the 18th, Phil has that time set aside. He would be here in person, right, Phil? You said you'd come to that.
Yes, that's my plan.
Yep. He'd come in person, be here, have that. He would stay for the discussion as well, so if you wanted to tap him then. But just really support us. And when Nilda and I talked, we thought, and I had been introduced to Phil right after our last meeting where this was. I had a chance to meet him because you just moved here from, was it Texas, Phil, that you just moved from?
Yeah, that was my last state.
And I had a chance to meet him I'm on the professional development committee for the Vermont Superintendent, so we had a chance to meet him, and I said, oh, I think it would be great to have someone besides myself or any board member facilitate this conversation. And he's agreed to do that.
And then what does the policy, redevelopment look like?
So that's the board, I mean, one of the things I will say as an aside for this is the board can, one of the things that I've had conversations with a couple of board members about, this is a board operations policy. I'm willing to do the drafting and editing for you. I'm not willing to do substantial content for you. So I want you to give direction in the meeting, and then we can go right through the adoption piece like we are with the flag policy right now and get you to revise and redraft that. A future board topic is policy work. We have a bunch to do. We've been doing some auditing stuff.
Great. Thank you.
So does that sound like a plan that is doable, guys?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Director hand raised.
Yeah, just one last comment. After the meeting last time, I was kind of afraid this was going to get dropped and not go anywhere. So I want to thank you, Nilda and Bill, for picking it up. And it seems like we're going to run this around sometime.
We can hear. At least I can hear what I'm told. That I like that directness of like, hey, make sure this gets done. Okay, that makes my job easy.
Thanks, Grant.
And thank you, Phil, for being willing to. Hopefully, we're getting you into Vermont. I know you were working with a couple other boards as well. So thank you, Phil, for quickly adapting your schedule.
Yeah, it's all good. I'll look forward to hearing from you and Nilda if you have some new direction or different direction in the next couple of weeks.
Okay,
I don't think so.
perfect. Thank you so much for stepping in quickly and helping us out.
Thank you.
Good to meet you. All right. And now, next item on the agenda is policy F38, the flag raising adoption policy. So this is warned for approval tonight. If we wish to do that, it's an action item. So I need a motion to, let's have a,
We move the flag raising ceremony adoption and approve it.
okay, is there a second?
Can you repeat the motion?
Yeah, what did you say, Al?
So Al made a motion to move the policy to approval and adopt it. I need a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Grant. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Now we can have discussion on policy F38, the flag raising adoption policy. I know that the last meeting, some of the discussions were around how long do we fly the whatever flag for, whatever the flag is, that is the flag that we have agreed to fly for whatever is going on. So that was one of the issues that came up. We know that there are other schools across the state and across the country that have approved similar type policies. So let's have some discussion.
Nilda, could I'm obviously don't like the policy, but I have a couple of questions and I'm wondering if someone, I don't care who, could answer them. The first paragraph, the last sentence, this policy is not intended to and does not create a forum for speech by students or any other members of the community. I simply don't know what that means.
Okay. Bill, is that something you can answer on the spot, or would you want to?
So having drafted this policy once before, when that was put there was to identify that it was really relating to the flagpole is the ownership of the school district. And it's not speech for the students, it's not speech for community, it's a representation of the school district. If you think about it with free speech area, that's what's saying it's not intended to be or create a forum for people to have conversation. It's the ownership of the school district.
Does that help, Peter?
Well, no, I won't pay a lot for it, but I'll buy it. My next one would be, the flag shall remain on the flagpole through the end of the school year and shall then be removed. Does that mean that every year they have to reapply? Or if we chose a flag at this point, they go to the end of the year, do they automatically start the beginning of the new year? Or do they have to reapply? And yeah, I'll stop there for now. I have a couple other questions, but.
I guess that isn't evident by the way it's written. I don't know what the intent was. I think it's vague enough that it could almost mean either.
Does that make it a good policy if it's vague enough that it can mean different things? I would think that's just the opposite.
Yeah, that's probably not, well, it's probably not the best approach, but I think someone else, let's just try to get all the questions out there. Grant, no, excuse me, Ryer, I think you had questions also.
Oh, yeah, but I don't want to, if Peter still has more questions, I don't want to interrupt him.
Well, I just got one more and I'm kind of on a roll here.
Sure. That's what I thought.
I'm I got two questions, no answers yet. So on one of them, the flag may not depict symbols that are understood to promote hate or the supremacy of one group or the other. They may not include content that is vulgar, religious, commercial, or subject to trademark. I understand those things and I can't say I disagree with those. So does that mean anything that's controversial? Because that's what those are. Those are all controversial issues. Are we saying that you can't put up a flag if it's controversial, which I would say we're going to have a naked flagpole there?
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay, it's just a question. It's not a
Controversy, in my opinion, controversy is different than hate towards a specific group.
But isn't hate itself controversial? Towards a particular group, it's controversy. Controversy is when people disagree.
Well, you asked me a question.
Okay, and I'm looking for an answer.
My answer is that the difference there is that controversial could be interpreted differently by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, but hate towards a specific group is pretty specific. So it's about an outward communication of something. And I think that Bill did answer your first question. I don't know that you're hearing it, but what he's saying is that a flag is not representative of one person. It's representative of the entire collective, SU, okay, or school district, excuse me. That's the answer. That is an answer.
Okay, well, I'm glad you understood it. I didn't. And unfortunately, when I asked a question, I want to understand the answer.
Do you understand it now?
No.
You don't understand. So like, I might believe one thing, okay, my own self, and so no one's going to put up a flag just because Joanna Jarose believes that one thing. It needs to be something that's within the mission, the vision of the entire MRUSD. And that's when it would be agreed upon to be put up. Not just based on one person's, beliefs.
I think the point of the flag is to say that this is a vision, this is something that we as a school stand for. It's not something that this student says. The point is to say that this isn't speech, so that anyone can say, well, I have freedom of speech, so I get to now take it and I get to take my freedom of speech here. It's to say we're reserving the right of this flag pole as a place that we determine what is and isn't the vision of the school district. so that individuals can't come in and say, well, I get freedom of speech, so now it's my turn to fly this flag, and I get freedom of speech, so it's not my turn to fly this flag. I think the whole point is to say specifically that it's not for speech, it's not about speech. What this is about is to highlight a particular issue, vision, mission, subject that we as a school district feel is important and feel needs to be highlighted.
Thank
It's
you.
also about inclusivity, it's not about exclusivity. And so when you talk about hate, that's exclusive. When you talk about inclusion, that's about standing for something, not against something.
And I think if we, as long as we, remember that the request to fly the flag is gonna be coming from an MRUSD student group. So we're not taking requests from outside groups. And it also has to support the mission and align with all the core values, et cetera. I did wanna speak, Peter, to your third question about, I think it was the second question about how long do you keep the flag up? And I think that, the statement that the flag shall remain on the school flagpole through the end of the year and shall be then removed unless the board elects a different timeline. And I think that kind of gives us the leeway to, if we don't have any other flag requests, it can stay up for the end of the year. Now, we might decide that we can hang more than one flag, but that kind of gives us leeway to decide a time frame.
I would just add to that. I mean, the student population is sort of fluid, right? You've got kids going in, kids going out.
Yep,
And so, regardless of what it actually says on the paper, and whether there's a loophole that someone might say, oh, we were approved and we're going to put it back up, really, it ought to get renewed every year because it's a different school, every year. It's a different set of kids. It's a different makeup of really everything. So that should be, it should be renewed, I guess,
Yes and
with
no.
that new set of students.
Right? Because if we're talking about it not being a form of speech, and we're talking about it as something that we all agree on as a core belief, that may not change necessarily
What if it
as
does?
much year to
Maybe
year.
maybe not.
But who are we
Maybe
all?
not renew, maybe review.
Review something.
Review,
Right.
because then that way we're all kind of on the same page.
Sure.
And if we're gonna listen to the students' voice, students bringing this up, it might change.
So there's that. And then, to get to what's controversial and what's not, the list of what's there, it may be the list of that particular list may include some controversial topics. I don't think it's exhaustive. I think there are other controversial topics that are not on the list. And so we're not saying you can't put something up there that's somewhat controversial, because there are things that are controversial that aren't listed there. Right? So I don't think the point is to avoid controversy, right? As much as it is, to have maybe some of these particular things that don't fit in, and you don't see how they could fit in with the current direction of the district.
That makes sense, thank you.
So I have a question. How would we handle, I was going to use the word controversy, but I don't want to. How would we handle more than one group wanting to raise a flag? If we have one, let's say we have one flagpole, we have a group that we believe in, it matches our mission, vision, goals. We say, okay, we want to hang that flag. And then suddenly, 2 weeks later, we get another group, which we also have the same feelings about. That's where I'm wondering whether or not we ought to put a time frame on this, not to necessarily say something negative about group number one, but allow the opportunity for more than one entity to be able to, fly the flag, because it might be not knowing how to make it happen that prevents someone from making the request. And after our first year of having this flag, maybe more entities will find out that they can make that request. And it might be situations or topics that we are not opposed with. So unless we want to, have a bunch of flagpoles, which could be another option, I sort of feel like we maybe ought to put a timeline on it that isn't necessarily the whole year.
Joanna has a question, comment.
Okay,
I've been doing AAU basketball for the past several months and gone to a lot of different schools all around the state. And there are schools that have flags hanging from their brick buildings. There's so many different ways. You don't have to hang it on a flagpole. So we've got signs, we've got lots of wall space. So they are hanging them from all different places, not just on a single flagpole. So I don't really see that as an obstacle.
Susan has a comment too.
And I guess I would add that, you know, if we could, if people wanna hang them on the flagpole and not on the side of the school, certainly there could be a clause that will allow up to 2 different flags at the same time, so you might have 4 flags hanging from the flagpole instead of 3. And we can write in that the flag shall remain on the school flagpole for a minimum of 1 month or 2 months. And if there are other people wanting to use that flagpole, it would then be readdressed. You know, but I think we can put a minimum. If no one else wants to hang a flag on the flagpole, then it can stay up for the whole year. I think we have that flexibility when, you know, by just adding a couple of words.
Yeah, I agree with you. Katie?
So, yeah, thank you.
So I can only see half the room the way it is right now, so if the other half has questions, I need to be told.
We're watching.
So I'm just gonna bring up a point that I brought up in our last meeting too. It's one of those things where the only thing I feel about not having you get this allotted amount of time is if one group comes in and they're getting 4 months, and then another group comes in and they wanna put their flag up, and then a month later somebody else wants to put their flag up, that 1 month flag didn't get the same exposure or whatever you wanna say as the first flag. And I feel like if we're gonna listen to the students' voices, then it should be a fair way to do it. And even with what Joanna said about they don't have to hang from the flagpole, maybe there's a place in the school when the flags aren't being flown, there's someplace within the school so that the students who are their voices, maybe they're being put up in the gym or someplace in the school to be represented.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I wasn't thinking that they could be in other places. I had it in my head that it was a flagpole, but you're right. It could be a banner of sorts that was flying somewhere else.
I guess my response to you, Katie, would be that if it was in the policy that it would be up for a minimum of this, then, you know, like
Oh, you did say that.
a minimum of this amount of time. If no one else comes along and wants to put it up, they can leave it there forever. You know,
You
but
did say, I'm sorry.
we
yes.
can't, you know what I mean?
Yep, no, I do.
Then 4 months later, someone will come in and, well, they can have their minimum of 1 month.
You did say minimum, I apologize, yep. You did say that.
So Nelda Breyer, this has got his hand.
So I'm gonna go back to the question I have, and it's kind of more of a statement. So I'm really a big fan of flags. I love flags. Right now it's May, so I am flying my Norwegian flag because I'm Norwegian, and it is the 10-day Mai on the 17th of May, and it's Norwegian Independence Day. So my point is that I really like flags as a symbol of like all sorts of things. My question here is, I think when we put limits on it like that, we end up maybe hindering ways we can use flags to bring attention to other things that students might want to. So I think like in November, it's Native American History Month, and like Swanton flies MBU flies the Abenaki flag. In November, I myself fly the Abenaki flag. And that's maybe something that, you know, a group in school would want to do. So my concern when we start putting time limits on it that aren't very fluid, like it is now, right now I feel it's very fluid, but if we put timelines on it, then we may end up messing with ways in which we can use the flag to highlight other values, other groups, other people that we want to. And I think it's much better to leave it kind of fluid and for us to say, okay, yeah, you can put the whatever flag you want to put up in, but in November we have students who want to fly this Abenaki flag, and so in November we're going to fly this flag, and then once that comes down, we can put your flag up again, or maybe there's a group that wants to fly it again. So for me, I like how how kind of vague that part is, because it allows us to be much more fluid in how we allow this to be used in a way that highlights the values that we want to highlight.
Ryer, I have a question for you. So I like the month, like Abenaki month, and so obviously there's months, Black History Month, and like, is that something? Just it's not going to be necessarily student driven, but is that something that we could somehow with?
So that my question
Right?
was going to be, what would we do
Right.
if this flag policy wasn't up and Bill, you wanted to fly, I don't know, like a pride flag or a Juneteenth flag or I'm trying to think of the different flags you fly.
Yeah, you're doing fine so far.
What would be the policy with what would you do or what would we do without this policy in place?
So without this policy in place, I'm gonna segue a little bit, because when I look at problems, I look at them through different lenses and try to come to the best decision for students. And so the reason I brought this policy to you was from a legal perspective, okay? I brought this from a legal, not necessarily how you wanna operationalize it, but so that you've declared that we have authority and ownership over the flagpole. That's not very clear out there in statute, and if you actually look at the clearest instructions on how to handle flags and to raise flags on flagpoles actually comes from the VFW. There really isn't any real clear guidance out there. At least it's been 3 years since I've looked at it, so I can't say that I'm top knowledge right now. But this is 3-year-old knowledge from when I did this policy before. I also believe that the board is the symbol for, not symbol, is the owners of the, represents the owners of the school, which is the community. And there's community values, and there's values that may not be the majority of the community or may be the majority of the community, I don't know, but I believe the board is the entity to make that decision. If I were the one, hey, Bill, you're tasked with doing this, and I want to get a direct answer to what you asked me, because you asked me what would I do, Bill. So if I were Bill, I would look at ways to have multiple representations throughout the year. But I'd want to bring it through with students. It's one of the reasons I like this policy so much, and why I like Leah's not with us anymore, unfortunately. But having students on the board, I think we bring a lot more power when students have a part in their education and in designing and running and directing how the school district operates. So that's why I'm slighted towards this policy. I mean, I'm biased because I've done it before, and I believe students need to have that voice. So I would go and say, students, what's important to you? As long, the part there about vulgar and hatred and those symbols of that, totally in with that. And then if I were tasked with that, I'd say, okay, so what are the groups here want to do, and have that discussion with students. I think pretty quickly we'd get to some of the flags we've talked about around here, and there may be some that we don't.
And I think it's important that we have a policy. You guys probably saw in the news that the Supreme Court just said that Boston was unconstitutional because they barred the Christian flag from hanging at City Hall. And the bottom line of that was they didn't have a policy about it. So by not having a policy, it was unconstitutional because it prohibited free speech. So that would be the other thing. Obviously, this should probably go through it a little bit.
So,
Jack. Neil,
Jack.
Yep, sorry.
So, what I would say is policies aren't carved in stone. So I would recommend we adopt the policy so we have one. And the thing is, you can change a policy at any time if we find snags or issues or whatever. But I think the policy is good, and I think it addresses many things. And I think we need to realize that we can change a policy if we find a problem in the future. And I think the board, and what I see in the policy is the board has the control. And it's going through, the students, which is great. And I think we need to just relax. And I think sometimes we pole vault over mouse poop,
Thanks, Jack. So one of the things I just wanted to point out about the policy statement in the first paragraph is it does specifically talk about a flagpole Okay, so it doesn't talk about banners on the wall or hanging out of the window or whatever. So when I was talking about the time frame, I was concerned, right? Because there's like this one flagpole. And then with Joanna's comment, I thought, oh, okay, well, if there's multiple places to fly the flag, then I don't have to get so hung up on it. But this policy talks specifically about a flagpole. I can accept this policy the way it is. I'm not that hung up on it either. I know that if we have issues, we can just make a change to the policy. It kind of sends a weird message when you do that. But on the other hand, if we create a policy that we can't manage, we have to fix it. So what's the pleasure of the board regarding this policy?
Nilda, could we make this a function of the student council? In other words, let them decide. We're saying that they're old enough to make decisions. Let them decide what flag's going to be flying.
So I'm gonna have to caution you, based on prior legal, I haven't asked this question in 3.5 years. For the board to give away its authority of ownership of facilities.
Well, I understand they recommend it to you and then you make the final decision, obviously.
No, it's actually good for it to sit with the board.
That would be speech, right?
Yeah, then we're getting into speech. Yeah, you are the one who make decisions about the school district and what the school, with that vision and mission.
Okay.
Can I ask
I
a
think it
question?
makes sense for us to make this decision. Yes, Ryan?
I just want to know, because it isn't really set here. So it talks about students making the decision. Does that mean that the students at the individual school, so for instance, if the students at BFA decided they wanted to fly a flag, would that then fly at just BFA? Would we have is this a uniform policy per school? Like, I just don't understand, it's not specific in that language.
Right, and it's deliberately vague because I haven't figured that part out, and I would take direction from all of you, as well as I haven't talked to my colleagues on the leadership team about where they're at.
Yeah, okay.
I know I've had 2 different requests for 2 different flags from 2 different schools.
So are we ready to vote on this the way it is? Do we want to,
Yes, Nilda, let's vote on it.
that's a yes?
Yes.
Are we all ready to vote? Okay, so we have,
So are we saying that it's still on the flagpole and flagpole only?
well, that's what the policy says.
Comment
Yes.
about being able to fly someplace other than just the flagpole.
Right now it says flagpole.
This is just a start.
We can make another policy.
Yeah. Or we can expand it.
You do it so quickly.
Start somewhere.
Okay, we're gonna take a vote and see where we're at. This is policy code F38. It's flag raising. It's been warned and is up for approval tonight. We have a motion and a second. I am going to take a roll vote on the policy as it's currently written. Al,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
No?
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Breyer,
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. So motion carries 8-0. 8-1-0, excuse me. Thank you for all that discussion. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is setting goals. So it's my understanding that the Goals Committee has met, has put out a request for folks to be on the committee, and I'm gonna turn it over to someone on the Goals Committee or Bill to help me out with the rest of the discussion, please.
So that's all correct, and it's very nearly the whole story. We have applicants, and we're meeting next week, I think, to sort through those applications.
Okay, yeah, I understand you're meeting on May 11th to
Yep.
go through what, you have 6 or so applicants?
And so we're gonna, you're gonna fill out the committee, those applicants, according to, you know, some sort of loose criteria that we've been discussing at the meetings. Essentially trying to engage, choose people, you know, that we think will help us engage as much of the community as possible in the right areas, so that we get some goals. We have sort of brought input into the goals.
Perfect. Thank you, Grant. Anyone have any questions for Grant or the Goals Committee? Hearing none, I'm going to move along. We got quite a lot more left on our agenda. Next item is the Governance Subcommittee discussion. Nina, are you, or Grant, you are the chair, I think. Are you prepared to give an update?
Yeah, I think for right now, what we need to do is bring draft of the policy for the board operations, responsibilities, and the superintendent authority. So I think we need to have another meeting or the right to do.
I have an action to review against what has already been discussed in our
Okay.
meetings and provide Bill with some feedback on that. And then I don't know if we do need another meeting
I think you might need one meeting just to, as a group, to say, yeah, this is what we want to bring forward. I don't think it's a long one, but I think it's enough to say of that document that I gave you, and say for you to charge Aaron and I to draft from what you say to bring those three policies.
Let's do that in public, so we're all.
Yeah, and then you bring those policies to this.
Okay, any questions for the Governance Subcommittee group? Okay, thank you. Okay, we're up to new business. First item on the new business agenda is the Educational Support Professionals, the ESP Master Agreement. I need a motion to approve the Master Agreement.
So moved.
I'll second.
As found as in attachment 8A. Thank you all. Jack was your ringleader here for the negotiations. So Jack, can you give us a quick highlight?
Well, it was a good negotiations series of meetings. And I think we came to a good outcome. I don't know if I have all the figures in my head, but it's very similar to the teacher negotiations. There was a little higher percentage on salary, and also a similar percentage for the signing bonus. And I think it ended in a very positive way. You can see the details. When you get the percentages, they turn out to be like 35 cents per hour on the base and that kind of thing for different groups. The issue with the ESP is that you have the custodial, the paraprofessionals, the other support staff. So it's not as exact on for the whole group. Each group has a very similar, but in some cases the details are a little different. But you can read in the attachment the outcome, and I think it was a good settlement for both the ESP group and for the school district.
Thanks, Jack.
Sure, the board, I mean, you can see the numbers in the attachment, but the percentages were.
It was 3.25 on the new money for all the indices, which is the same as the teachers. And then it was an $850 signing bonus, which is a little bit more money percentage-wise than what the teachers got.
Right.
Thank you. Any questions for Jack or Bill? We ready to take a vote? We have a motion and a second to approve the ESP master agreement. Al,
Yes.
Katie,
I can sustain, right?
No, you can.
Oh, okay, yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Ryer,
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda is the administrators' contracts and the non-union contracts. So the administrators are obviously our administrators. The non-union are all these other people that work for the MRUSD that do not fall under a master agreement or a union agreement. We do have the option to go into executive session if we get too specific about anyone that could identify them. But we can start off as taking action. I think that the motion would be to accept the recommendation of the administration regarding that. So first, let me ask if anyone feels that we need to go into executive session to discuss this, or can we start off hearing what the administration's recommendation is and go from there?
We need to go in executive session.
Say that again?
We need to go in executive session.
We need to go into executive session?
I would agree with that.
Okay. We can definitely do that. We don't have to do that, but we can do that. Okay, so in order to go to executive session, we would need a finding that premature public knowledge would place the board at a substantial disadvantage under 1 VSA article, all of that, the labor relations agreement. Any question that we would have that finding? Okay, so we will go into executive session later in the meeting to discuss this topic. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for unpaid leave for someone named Caitlin Mayer. She's requested a leave as presented in attachment 8C. Can I have a motion to approve her leave for discussion, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second?
Okay.
Thank you. Any discussion related to her request for unpaid leave? Hearing none, we're going to take a vote. Al,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Ryer,
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the food service contract renewal. This is an action item. I need a motion to renew the contract with the Abbey Group for discussion, please.
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jack. Martha, are you here?
No, no, she couldn't be with us tonight, so I'm sitting in as a poor substitute.
Okay, her name's on my list.
I know her name's on your list. She needed to have the night as you gave me the night last week, so.
Okay,
As you'll see, there's an attachment in here that's a memo from Martha about we have the option to renew the contract at the CPI rate that's in our contract with the Abbey Group. We've had great working relationships with them. We recommend that that's what we do for next year. You can see the price increases to our costs are, I don't know the reimbursements, and that's the only thing I'm sitting here not knowing is what we get from the federal government for reimbursement rates. I think they're higher than that, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
we have a requirement bill, right, to go out to bid periodically, but this is not the year. that
This is
we
not the
have
year,
to
we
bid,
have the
right?
option, we have to, once we get to 5 years, we have to renew. And there's very tight auditing and regulation from the state of Vermont and the federal on how we run these contracts. So,
What is the
Okay.
projection for the fall?
All right.
In terms of meals?
Thank you. Any questions for Bill related to the contract, the new contract? Yes, Ryer.
I don't have a question. I had a couple people talk to me about this because they're very, I mean, this is very minimal, but they're very upset about the honey buns. And it's, I just thought I'd bring it up and say it, just so people, so I said it, and so those people know I said it, but that was something that
They like them or they don't?
they do not like.
They do not.
They're very upset about them. So I just wanted to say that, just so it's out there. And I get it, but
We'll bring it to the town school, because those kids are all.
Joanna has a
Yeah,
comment
no
question.
problem.
Wait.
It's just frustrating that that's still in existence because we've had a lot of farm to school meetings about that. And every year you have a meeting about it and they say they're gonna remove them from the menu. And then when you don't have a farm to school meeting about it, it goes back on the menu. And so we should be serving our children nutritious food. And honey buns for breakfast with chocolate milk is not nutritious. So I feel really strongly about that. And that's just an example. So Joan is on the Abbey, so Joan does not experience the same situations that can come about from some of the food choices, because she is on top of it.
All right, thank you for that. Are we ready to vote or do you want to have more discussion? Okay, so we're voting on granting the Abbey Group contract for another year. Al,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joanna,
I'm gonna abstain.
okay, Ryer,
I'm also abstaining.
Nelda votes yes. So the motion carries 8 to 8.5, no, 7 to 1.5 to 0. Did I do that right? 7.5 to 1.5 to 0. Can we get some feedback to the Abbey about this honey bun thing?
will do.
Thank you.
Not just that, but I hear the board.
I literally got approached by someone just picking up my kids, so I needed to bring it up.
Well, that's good that they do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No.
Oh no, I think it's important to give the Abbey feedback about it. Sure. All right. Next item on the agenda is new business item E, award the bid for SATEC sidewalk replacement. So this is an action item. I need a motion to award the bid for the SATEC sidewalk replacement to give me the name of the company.
So moved.
Construction.
Thank you. Thanks, Al. Is there a second, please?
A second.
Thank you. What was the name of the company again?
Goslin Construction and Excavation.
Yeah, got it. I knew that, couldn't remember it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Can we have discussion again? Bill, are you filling in for Martha?
Yes, I am. This is planned work that's to be done by the end of the school year. It was something that was in the budget. They've been, as many of you know, at SATEC, they've been working on their sidewalks for several years. They have a yearly chunk they do every year. So this is a piece.
Okay, any questions for Bill related to this project? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. We have a motion and a second to award the SATEC sidewalk replacement to Goslin Construction and Excavation. Al,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Ryer,
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda is other business under warrants. First item, need a motion to approve the warrants, acknowledging that passage of the motion will act as authorization and signature of any individual board members participating remotely. May I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion related to warrants? Hearing none, I'm going to go for the vote. Al,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Ryer,
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Thank you all for that. And the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Bill?
Thank you, Nilda. A couple of things I wanted to make of note. First, this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And there are several activities happening in the buildings. Today, this morning at Fairfield, there was a red carpet walk for the staff. That was really neat. That was put up by Judy and Kelsey. I know Joan has a couple of activities going on around here.
Cinnamon Bun Friday.
Cinnamon Bun Friday. Let's talk about buns. I was going to say coffee and tea as well, right?
Homemade one. This is the really bad stuff that comes in the package.
Really good. Yesterday afternoon, I know that there was a really nice appreciation at BFA during the staff meeting. I know that NCTC did something similar, and trying to do something, it's not just teachers, we recognize all the staff. So we have 560 staff members here in Maple Run. That's quite a few. One of the things we've discussed is there something that we could do for each and every staff member. We're probably a little late on that this year. We did recognize them with some nice, with sending out there were a couple of emails, one for myself and a few others. But I know the buildings have really been on top of this, and I also know that the PTOs are doing some things for the members. I saw today, at the end of the day at Fairfield, saw some really nice flowers going in from parents dropping them off in the pickup line. So I thank all those, and thank you all for recognizing the staff. It says teacher appreciation. For me, it's school staff appreciation. Thank you. They're the reason we're keeping this place running, and they're doing a great job. Another thing that I really wanted to celebrate, and I said this when I was at Rotary yesterday, I thought going into this year for contracts for teachers and having them returned, that we would have a lot of teacher vacancies. I can tell you the percentage of vacancies that we've had this year compared to the past 2 years is less. So we've had less turnover, which has been great. And I think that's a signifier of the hard work you do as a board with the Teachers Association and recognizing them, but also the great working conditions that folks have. That's not to say people haven't been stressed. People have been very stressed. But we have less than 5% staff turnover right now, which we've had higher the other 2 years I've been here. So I was when the contracts were all due without an extension last week on Thursday, and I quickly asked for a calculation, and it was a lot less than what I expected, so I'm celebrating that one. Those are the two things I'm glad to take any questions, but those are the things that I really want to make note of.
Thanks, Bill. Questions for Bill? Okay, hearing no questions, I'm going to move on to the next item, which is board announcements. Any board announcements? Okay, hearing none, I guess I'm going to move on to agenda for future meetings. We've discussed some of those agenda items tonight. I'm sure Erin is keeping track of them to get them on the next agenda. anything that we may not have mentioned that we want to get on the list for future meetings?
So, I have something I'm interested in talking about.
Okay,
I would like for us to talk about the 2 half votes we have, and how weird that is. And
the 2 what?
half votes we have are 2 half votes,
Okay,
and just talk about that in terms of how.
You understand what it mean, how we got there?
No, I
Yeah.
understand what you
Okay.
mean. I'd like for us to
Yeah.
discuss.
All right, we can, all right, anything else?
Bill has something.
No, I'm looking at John to make sure he lets me in.
Oh.
Yeah, we won't do
My
that.
bad.
I'm not
Sorry,
looking at
Nilda.
John.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep it, but it let me- It's taking forever.
Does someone else have anything else for future meetings that they want to get on the list? Okay, hearing none, we do have a need to go into executive session to discuss administration contracts and non-union contracts. Yes, Joanna, yes?
I'm sorry. I would like to hear how the safety personnel are working out at the schools, since we've made a change.
build up, we have that on a schedule.
Well, we
report
have
out
the,
schedule.
we have the district liaison officer, which we gave in March and in November. But I'm not sure if Joanna's asking about that or asking about, we have one position that's a school safety personnel that we have under our own direction. So when you say
That's the
that,
one you're
which one-
asking about?
I didn't realize it was just one. I thought it was.
It's just one.
Okay, my apologies.
So it's just a BFA.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that's something I just don't know where the pleasure of the board. If that's we're more welcome to talk about it. From my point of view and what I hear from Brett, things are going really well.
I'd like to maybe just get it on the agenda for a quick report out at some point.
So is it the pleasure of the board to hear about the safety personnel working at VFA? I know Brett just turned on his camera and microphone, so what would be a good, we can, Bill, we can try to schedule that for.
We can schedule that. Yeah, we can schedule that.
All right, perfect.
Hey,
Thank you.
Nilda, can we also, we haven't had an update for the proficiency grading and stuff lately. Could we, future.
Update on proficiency, you said?
Yeah, just how that's going and just kind of get an update on that. Please.
Adding it to the list.
Thank you.
Okay. So we do have a need to go into executive session. We have 2 topics. One of them is administrator contracts. The other one is non-union, non-union contracts. We had a finding earlier that to go to discuss these in public would put the board at a premature disadvantage. So Bill, who do we need in executive session besides the board and yourself?
That's it.
We are out of executive session. We are now addressing the item on our agenda that was related to the administration's contract and the non-union contracts. The chair will entertain a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation related to non-union employees and administrators' contracts.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Al is muted. Any discussion? Yo, Al, you're muted. Okay. I just want to give him an opportunity to vote.
Yes, to come back.
So there's a motion and a second on the floor. We're going to take a vote to accept the superintendent's recommendation. Katie,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes?
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Ryer,
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Al, are you there? Well, I think Al, we're gonna have to put Al abstaining, I guess, for now, because I don't know what happened. Motion carries 8-0. 8-0 to 1. I think I said that right. And is there any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, going to adjourn the meeting at 8:03. Please turn off the recording.